Riders are skipping these Honda motorcycles and dealers are desperate to clear them out. Once trusted, now ignored, these 7 bikes are sitting untouched on showroom floors across America. If you're thinking about buying a used Honda, these are the models you'll want to avoid before they vanish completely. Number 7. Honda CTX 700 North. It was supposed to be the answer for riders who wanted comfort, convenience, and just enough edge to turn heads, but it ended up lost somewhere in between. With styling that looked clean but not bold and performance that was steady but never thrilling, this model tried to be all things to all riders and wound up inspiring no one. It arrived in showrooms with a low-slung silhouette, cruiser-style seating, and Honda's unique automatic dual-clutch transmission, which removed the clutch lever entirely and offered a push-button shifting experience. The powertrain was built around a 670 cubic centimeter liquid-cooled parallel twin engine, tuned for torque rather than outright speed. At full throttle, it produced 47 horsepower and 44 pound-feet of torque. That's more than enough to move around town and hold freeway speeds, but it lacked the grunt or rumble that cruiser riders typically expect. Paired with the automatic dual-clutch transmission, it offered seamless acceleration but removed much of the tactile satisfaction that comes from shifting gears yourself. The result was a smooth, efficient ride that somehow felt distant and uninvolving. Underneath the frame was a steel diamond design supporting a conventional suspension layout. Up front, a 41-inch telescopic fork handled road imperfections with 4.2 inches of travel. In the rear, Honda's ProLink single shock offered about 4.3 inches of movement. Braking was provided by a single disc with a 2-piston caliper at the front and a single disc at the back. Dual-channel anti-lock braking system came standard. The bike rode on 17-inch cast aluminum wheels with a 120-section tire up front and a 160-section tire in the rear. Weighing in at 478 pounds wet, it was not overly heavy for a mid-sized cruiser, but its weight combined with modest power meant acceleration was never brisk. With a seat height of just 28.3 inches, it catered to shorter riders and those looking for more confidence at stoplights or parking lots. The low center of gravity made it easy to maneuver at low speeds, and the foot-forward ergonomics gave it a relaxed riding stance ideal for city use and short weekend trips. The instrument panel was a fully digital LCD setup that displayed gear position, speed, fuel economy, and other basics clearly. Fuel capacity sat at 3.27 gallons, and fuel economy often reached close to 60 miles per gallon in real-world riding. Storage was limited to a small cubby under the tank shroud, and while Honda offered some factory accessories, aftermarket support remained limited throughout its lifespan. Riders looking to customize were often left with few choices, and resale interest faded fast. With a base price of $7,699, it sat in a strange place. More expensive than some traditional cruisers with stronger identities, and not quite advanced enough to compete with modern touring or adventure machines. It wasn't just that riders didn't like it, it was that they didn't remember it. It left no strong impression on the road, at dealerships, or in online forums. Another Honda aimed at casual riders made a similar promise: comfort, approachability, and simplicity. But the one that came next disappeared even quicker. Think these bikes are worth a second look, or are they better left behind? Like this video if you think these bikes just missed the mark, and subscribe for more updates on the worst motorcycles out there. Number 6. Honda CTX 1300. This was Honda's big swing at redefining what a long-distance cruiser could be. With its stretched profile, low-slung stance, and V4 muscle borrowed from a sport tour legend, the CTX 1300 seemed built to impress. It promised the comfort of a bagger, the smoothness of a highway commuter, and the styling of a modern touring machine, all while carrying the distinctive CTX badge. But somewhere between ambition and execution, this bike lost its way. It didn't miss because of one major flaw. It missed because no one could figure out what it was trying to be. At its heart was a 1,261 cubic centimeter liquid-cooled, longitudinally mounted V4 engine, essentially a detuned version of the mill that powered the renowned ST-1300. It produced 83 horsepower at 6,000 revolutions per minute, with 78 pound-feet of torque peaking at 4,500. That translated to strong roll-on acceleration, especially at highway speeds, and effortless overtaking without the need to downshift. Power delivery was smooth and the shaft final drive ensured clean, low-maintenance performance. On paper, this was everything a distance rider could want, but in practice it felt more like a refined executive tourer than a machine built for the open road's raw thrill. Supporting the CTX 1300 was a steel double cradle frame with a long and low geometry. Fully fueled, the bike tipped the scales at 731 pounds. That mass was cushioned by a plush suspension system, a 43mm inverted front fork, and a twin-shock rear setup with adjustable preload. The ride was composed, stable, and undeniably comfortable, but sharp cornering and agile maneuvers were not its strength. Braking was handled by dual front discs, with 4-piston calipers and a single disc brake at the rear. Honda's combined anti-lock braking system came standard, linking front and rear for smooth, predictable stops. Rolling on 18-inch cast aluminum wheels front and rear, the CTX 1300 wore wide tires that contributed to its planted road feel. The wheelbase stretched out to 64.5 inches, giving it long-haul poise, but limiting its maneuverability in city traffic or tight parking lots. Seat height measured just under 29 inches, welcoming for most riders, especially those seeking a flat-footed reach at lights or during parking maneuvers. Despite its weight, the bike carried itself well once in motion, but slow-speed handling required a bit of planning. Fuel capacity sat at 5.1 gallons, and the real-world mileage was commendable at around 48 miles per gallon. This gave the bike a theoretical range of over 240 miles, respectable for a mid-weight tourer. Launched in 2014, the standard model carried a manufacturer's suggested retail price of $15,999. The deluxe version tacked on $2,000 more, bringing it to $17,999. That put it in a strange middle ground, more expensive than value cruisers, yet less equipped than full-dress tourers. By the end of its short production run, U.S. sales were discontinued after the 2014 model year. Dealers discounted leftover inventory, riders moved on, and the CTX 1300 quietly disappeared from the spotlight. It was not a bad motorcycle. It was capable, well-built, and thoughtfully equipped. But it entered a market that was looking for passion, not practicality. In chasing balance, it forgot how to inspire. And that made the next bike on this list, a bloated heavyweight with no clear roll, feel oddly familiar. Don't ride with worn-out gear. We've listed the jackets, gloves, and tools real riders count on. Check the description below. Number 5. Honda CB 1100. It had the looks of a legend. With throwback styling, a wide stance, and classic proportions, this machine seemed like it was built to honor Honda's golden era. Riders expected soul, heritage, and performance from something carrying the CB name. What they got was a motorcycle that looked the part but never delivered on the road. Beneath all the polished chrome and vintage design cues, this was a model without urgency, without identity, and without an audience to save it. The engine was an air and oil-cooled inline 4-cylinder, producing 88 horsepower and 66 pound-feet of torque from a 1,148 cubic centimeter displacement. Those numbers were respectable, but performance felt subdued. Throttle response was muted and delayed. The exhaust tone was barely audible, especially for a bike of this size. When pushed, the motor didn't growl. It hesitated. For a model that looked like it belonged on posters from the 1970s, it offered none of the drama or edge. It cruised comfortably, but failed to excite. Built on a traditional steel double cradle frame, the chassis leaned heavily into comfort. Front suspension came by way of a standard telescopic fork, while the rear relied on twin shocks. The setup worked fine on open highways or clean city streets, but confidence dropped significantly in tight curves or under heavy braking. Speaking of brakes, the bike used dual front discs with 2-piston calipers and a single disc at the rear. Anti-lock braking came standard, but the system was tuned for ease, not aggression. Braking felt soft, and in emergency scenarios it lacked the bite sport-oriented riders expect. Wheel size was set at 18 inches front and rear, wrapped in relaxed profile tires meant for smooth pavement rather than spirited cornering. With a wheelbase measuring 61 inches, the bike tracked straight but required effort to maneuver in tighter spaces. Seat height stood at 31.3 inches, tall enough for a commanding view, yet still manageable for most riders. Unfortunately, the biggest issue wasn't the dimensions, it was the weight. Fully fueled and ready to ride, this bike tipped the scales at 576 pounds. On long, straight roads, that bulk offered stability. In stop-and-go traffic or tighter urban settings, it made the bike feel slow and unresponsive. Fuel capacity came in at 4.4 gallons, and real-world riding returned an average of 45 miles per gallon. That offered decent range for commuting or weekend cruising, but the CB was never intended to tour. The ergonomics were neutral but not adjustable. The handlebars sat at a casual reach, and the foot pegs allowed for mild knee bend. But without wind protection or storage options, long-haul comfort was never part of the equation. Even in the details, it fell short. Instrumentation was purely analog. 2 round dials, no gear indicator, no ride modes, and no digital features. There were no heated grips, no cruise control, and no built-in electronics. Riders paying $12,399 when new expected more. At that price point, competitors offered technology packages, traction control, or at the very least, some rider-focused amenities. Here, the presentation was retro, but the execution was bare. The next Honda on this list took a completely different approach. Where this one lacked power, the next came overloaded with bulk, confused styling, and even fewer buyers willing to take the gamble. Number 4. Honda DN01. It looked like something out of a science fiction movie. Sleek, low-slung, and visually unlike anything else on the road. With its stretched-out bodywork, matte black fairings, and wide angular front end, this bike didn't just draw attention, it confused people. It was part cruiser, part automatic touring machine, and part styling experiment that never got the support it needed. Some thought it might be Honda's answer to futuristic comfort cruising. Others thought it was a rolling concept that somehow slipped into production. Either way, most riders looked and walked right past it. The engine at the core of this bike was a 680 cubic centimeter liquid-cooled parallel twin with a mild performance tune designed more for comfort than aggression. It produced 47 horsepower and 44 pound-feet of torque, placing it squarely in the middleweight class with no particular edge. While it shared this engine with other models in Honda's NC lineup, the way it was delivered in this platform felt even more subdued due to the weight and long wheelbase. It had smooth acceleration, no doubt, especially when paired with the automatic dual-clutch transmission. But there was no bark, no bite, and almost no excitement. It was mechanical whispering in a world of V-twin thunder. The suspension setup was basic but serviceable, featuring a conventional telescopic front fork and a single rear shock mounted beneath the rider. Braking came from a single front disc with a dual piston caliper and a rear disc of similar design. Anti-lock braking system was included, and the entire frame rode low with a center of gravity that made parking lot maneuvering easier than you'd expect. Still, with a curb weight of 570 pounds, it was far from nimble. The longer wheelbase and unique frame geometry prioritized looks over lean angle or quick response, and that meant anyone hoping for performance found themselves sorely disappointed. One of the main selling points, or at least supposed to be, was the futuristic cockpit. The bike featured a digital dash, feet-forward seating, wide mirrors, and integrated turn signals. Storage was limited to a small compartment near the tank area, and many riders noted the lack of saddlebags or underseat capacity made longer rides impractical. There was no windscreen by default, and aftermarket support was nearly non-existent. For a motorcycle that looked ready to tackle the future, it offered very little day-to-day convenience. The DN01 sat at a price point of $8,499, placing it above many more traditional cruisers and sports standards in Honda's own lineup. And for that price, riders expected either raw performance or luxury touring amenities. Instead, they got a bike that didn't quite excel at either. It was too awkward for hardcore cruiser fans, too slow for sport bike riders, and too strange-looking for traditional touring buyers. Riders who tried to love it often came back disillusioned. It was a motorcycle that seemed to answer a question no one had asked, and did so quietly. While the DN01 looked like the future, the next bike clung too tightly to the past and paid the price. Number 3. Honda Shadow Aero 750. There was a time when this bike was considered the definition of a reliable, affordable cruiser. It offered just enough performance to keep new and intermediate riders happy, and its traditional styling made it a favorite among those who preferred their machines to look the part. With a clean retro design, plenty of chrome, and a relaxed riding stance, it seemed like a permanent fixture in showrooms. But in the ever-evolving world of motorcycles, even icons lose their shine, and this one never found its second wind. Under the classic cruiser shell, it was powered by a 745 cubic centimeter liquid-cooled V-twin engine. That power plant produced 44 horsepower and 47 pound-feet of torque. For its time, those numbers were decent, especially considering its focus on comfort and low-end grunt. Mated to a 5-speed transmission and shaft drive, the ride was smooth and dependable. It was never built for speed or track days. It was designed to glide through town and cruise comfortably on the open road. For many older riders or newcomers, it fit the bill perfectly. That was the key to its popularity. Until it wasn't. What held it back in the long run wasn't one catastrophic flaw, but a series of missed updates. The world moved forward with fuel injection, better braking systems, and sleeker designs. Meanwhile, this model clung to its carbureted setup long after others in the segment had made the switch. Eventually, Honda updated the bike to electronic fuel injection, but by then it had already lost traction with modern riders. Younger buyers didn't see it as a lifestyle choice, they saw it as outdated. They were seeking tech-forward bikes with ride modes, traction control, and bold design. The Shadow remained locked in time. Weighing in at 553 pounds wet, it carried its weight low thanks to its 25.9-inch seat height. That made it approachable for smaller or older riders and easy to manage at low speeds. Suspension came in the form of a front fork with large diameter 41-inch tubes and dual rear shocks with 5-position spring preload adjustability. Braking duties were handled by a single front disc and a rear drum, which by modern standards is a hard sell. Even budget cruisers today feature front and rear disc setups. The lack of anti-lock braking system as standard equipment pushed it even further behind the competition. The bike rolled on a wire spoke wheel set with a 120-inch front tire and a 160-inch rear tire. Its exhaust featured a long, retro-inspired dual setup that delivered a soft but present rumble. Riders appreciated its steady throttle response and solid reliability, but more often than not they found themselves wishing it had more bite. It was a good bike for casual weekend rides, but in a world where buyers expect more from even entry-level cruisers, good started to sound like not enough. With a retail price that hovered around $7,799 toward the end of its run, it sat awkwardly between more exciting options and cheaper competitors. Riders looking for nostalgia and simplicity had more choices than ever, some even from within Honda's own lineup. Meanwhile, other Japanese and American brands offered mid-size cruisers with more attitude, more power, and better features. If the Shadow overstayed its welcome, the next bike was never truly welcomed at all. Number 2. Honda Goldwing F6B. This bike was supposed to bring fresh energy to a legendary platform, but instead it left many riders scratching their heads. The power plant was an 1,832 cubic centimeter liquid-cooled flat-six engine producing 118 horsepower and 125 pound-feet of torque. The braking system featured dual front discs with 3 piston calipers and a single rear disc, all linked through a combined anti-lock braking system. Suspension duties were handled by a 45mm telescopic fork with anti-dive control in the front and a ProLink single shock with adjustable preload in the rear. Wet weight came in at 848 pounds with a seat height of 28.5 inches. The starting price was $19,999. Built to appeal to a younger audience, the F6B took one of the most recognized names in touring and stripped it down to the essentials. It landed in showrooms with an aggressive silhouette, minimal bodywork, and a promise of performance without the bulk. But instead of carving out a new path, it got lost between categories. On paper, the numbers were impressive. The engine delivered smooth, turbine-like acceleration, and the ride was balanced, quiet, and luxurious. But that polish came at a cost. Riders used to the rumble of a V-twin or the visceral feel of a traditional bagger often found the flat six sterile and uninspiring. It performed beautifully, but it didn't stir the soul. That issue was made worse by the stripped-down format. Gone was the top trunk, the plush pillion, and the towering windscreen. Instead, the F6B offered integrated saddlebags, a shorter windshield, and a more streamlined appearance that never quite caught on with its intended audience. Ergonomics were solid, with wide bars, a low center of gravity, and a relaxed, feet-forward riding stance. On long stretches of highway, it was planted and calm, and its chassis geometry made it surprisingly stable in high-speed sweepers. But slow-speed handling still felt heavy, especially in tight quarters or parking lots. Fuel capacity sat at 6.6 gallons, and real-world fuel economy hovered between 38 and 42 miles per gallon. The range was decent for weekend touring, but not extraordinary. Riders expecting a stripped bagger with attitude got something closer to a luxury commuter dressed down. The instrument panel was a mix of analog and digital displays offering speed, tachometer, fuel range, and basic audio integration. However, the interface lacked the infotainment systems riders had come to expect on modern touring machines. Bluetooth was absent and there were no rider modes or performance customizations. At this price point, and with the pedigree it carried, many felt the bike should have done more. Styling was a bold experiment. Matte finishes, low-profile bodywork, and a sharp tail section gave the F6B a silhouette unlike any other in Honda's lineup. It certainly stood out, but not always in the right way. Some saw it as forward-thinking, while others viewed it as an identity crisis. It wasn't enough of a goldwing to please loyalists, and not enough of a cruiser to convert V-twin fans. As a result, many dealerships struggled to move them off the floor. Still, nothing illustrates Honda's slow-motion exit from a segment like the final model on this list. Do any of these bikes still have a shot, or are they doomed for extinction? Number 1. Honda V-FR 1200F. It once stood as the flagship of Honda's sport touring lineup, a bike built for long stretches of highway, twisting mountain roads, and high-speed poise. But as time went on, the V-FR 1200F began to show cracks in its armor. What was once a symbol of cutting-edge engineering slowly turned into a relic left behind by a rapidly changing market. Built on decades of sport touring legacy, this model should have been a powerhouse. Instead, it faded into the background without so much as a sound. The engine was a 1,237 cubic centimeter, liquid-cooled V4 design, known for its refinement and balance. It produced 172 horsepower and 129 pound-feet of torque, which put it right at the top of its class on paper. The delivery was buttery smooth, offering torque across the entire rev range, and the V4 configuration gave it a unique feel that riders loved, at least those who could afford it. For all its power and composure, the bike struggled to generate buzz. Part of that came down to timing. The model arrived in the early 2010s, just as the market was beginning to shift away from heavy sport tours and toward lightweight adventure-style motorcycles. Weighing in at 689 pounds fully fueled, the VFR 1200F was no lightweight. For many riders, it was simply too heavy for city riding and not comfortable enough to replace a full-dress touring bike. The weight, combined with a tall seat height of 31.9 inches, made it less appealing to a wide range of riders, especially those looking for easy maneuverability at lower speeds or in urban settings. Suspension duties were handled by a 43-inch telescopic fork in the front with spring preload adjustment, while the rear featured a single-sided Pro-Link swing arm with adjustable preload and rebound damping. The braking system was strong, with dual front discs using 6-piston calipers and a single rear disc. Anti-lock braking system came standard. The bike rode on 17-inch cast wheels and had a fuel capacity of 5.6 gallons, which allowed for long-distance riding without frequent stops. But the problem was never in the numbers. The problem was the package. Its styling, while sophisticated, felt outdated the moment it hit the showroom floor. With wide fairings, a bulky tail section, and a conservative color palette, it looked more like a design from the early 2000s than something built to lead a new decade. Riders were also critical of the lack of standard touring features. The luggage system was optional, the wind protection wasn't quite tall enough for taller riders, and the seat wasn't praised for long-distance comfort. These gaps made it difficult to justify the bike's original starting price of $15,999. These bikes weren't necessarily bad, they were just ignored, misaligned, or released at the wrong time. And in today's market, that's all it takes to vanish. Hit subscribe because more forgotten legends and buyer-saving insights are coming your way.